Should dynasty managers be psyched about the future of Drake Maye and Cam Ward? Well, we'll tell you on a special edition of the Locked On Dynasty podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Dynasty podcast. I'm your host, Michael Fabiano. You could find me on the X machine at Michael_Fabiano. And today I've got a very special guest, my pal, the great actor, fantasy guru, Dynasty League fan, James Roday Rodriguez. We appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day and being an everyday listener on the show, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Crossover Thursday around the NFL, and Crossover Thursday is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. James, welcome to the program, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Fabs. It means a great deal. Let me ask you this. Are you at all concerned that today's edition of the Lockdown Dynasty podcast might be too special?
It's never too special when I have you co-hosting, my friend.
So you think the people can handle this?
I think they can handle it.
Right.
I think they can. And I think it's going to be fun because you are a fantasy football nut, but you also love Dynasty. So talk about how long you've been playing Dynasty leagues and what's the draw from Dynasty compared to typical seasonal leagues.
Yeah, well, as you know, I started playing fantasy many years ago. 99 was the first organized fantasy football league that I participated in, and that remains my home league to this day. So we're in season 26 of that league.
Wow.
And the evolution of fantasy has been a lot of fun to watch, and every time a new format presents itself, I have to stick my toe in the water to see if it's for me. And they're not all for me, but Dynasty in particular, I really got bitten by that bug. I do keep it to one league so that I can put all of my focus and energy Dynasty-wise into that one league, but it's an incredibly competitive league. We all take it very seriously. The way it's structured is interesting. It's co-commissioners, JJ Zachariason and Hollywood writer and screenwriter Garrett Lerner came together and created a Dynasty league that was half experts, half like Hollywood writer, actor, dumbasses. And the idea was well, if you put half and half into a Dynasty league, who's going to win every year? Are the experts just going to dominate this league? And sure enough, I think we're going into season 6, and us dumbasses have won every single season but one.
Really? Wow.
JJ finally took it home last season. It was the first win for the experts.
Wow. Yeah. Listen, I mean, we obviously have a pretty deep and knowledgeable, we know who the third string quarterback is for, almost every team. We understand depth chart movement and what a player getting injured means to the player behind him, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, fantasy football is almost just about luck as it is knowledge, right? Like, for example, in one of my leagues, I've lost CeeDee Lamb, I've lost James Conner, and I've lost Terry McLaurin. What am I going to do? I mean, injuries happen, and see, I feel like you're sort of on the edge, right? Because you are an actor and a writer, and you're great at that, but you're borderline fantasy guru because you're playing in so many leagues, so you're kind of the best of both worlds there. Have you won the league?
I have won the league, and I have finished second. I've been competitive every year, I think, save one. And in the 1 year that I wasn't, I made the decision to pack up very early on in the season and start collecting draft capital so that the following year I controlled the first round of the draft. I think I had 3 first round picks. And that's the year that I took Najee Harris, Jamar Chase, and then traded that third first rounder for Jalen Hurts. And
oh, wow.
Chase and Hurts have become like building blocks for me. And Najee, even though he didn't really turn out those first 2 seasons, he was great. Like, you know, he gave you everything you'd hope for. So for 2 years, even he worked out for me. And what's interesting about Dynasty is also like, you're in a really competitive 12-team Dynasty league. There's almost nothing on the wire. Like, you're not going to be able to go to waivers and dig yourself out of a hole. So you're looking at trades, and you're looking at future, and you're looking at other teams that are getting old and that need help. And a lot of times you just have to sort of look at your team and go, this isn't the year. So let me start making moves for next season. And that's what makes Dynasty cool, because in a startup league or in a redraft league, you know, if you go 0-5, you're probably done. And yet there's still so much season left. And what are you doing? Like, you're just trying to finish 9th. Like, it's awful. But with the Dynasty League, you can go 0-5. You can recognize, oh, I'm done for this year. What can I start doing for next year?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's the allure of Dynasty to me as well. And we're going to get into your team a little bit later on in the show and talk about some of the players that you have that maybe there's some issues with, and we'll get your thoughts on what you're going to do with those players and maybe help some of the listeners out there. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the young quarterbacks in the league. And you're a big-time Tennessee Titans fan. And
yes.
I don't exactly
appreciate the Oiler jersey, pal.
I had to wear Earl Campbell for you because, you know, this jersey should be worn every week, and unfortunately they don't wear it hardly enough. But Cam Ward, especially in a Superflex league, which you and I both play in Dynasty Superflex leagues, I mean, Cam Ward has not had a great start to his career. It's only 5 weeks. I understand that. The Titans don't really have a lot of, let's just say, weapons around him. There's some questions about Brian Callahan. What are your thoughts long-term on Cam Ward, knowing that he's not really in the best situation right now to produce from a fantasy standpoint?
The jury's out, and obviously fans have concerns. That offensive line situation just keeps getting worse. And what's interesting is that we keep throwing draft capital and free agent money at the offensive line. We have, you know, Bill Callahan, who's supposedly the offensive line whisperer, as our offensive line coach, and we're just not taking steps forward. So anytime you bring a young quarterback into a situation where they don't have protection, you're playing with fire. You're flying very close to the sun with his development. And for all of the the natural instincts and playmaking ability that Cam may have outside of structure, you know, he's still a kid. And he still needs to be developed, and he still needs to be put in a situation to succeed. And unfortunately, there's too much history that tells us when that development is stunted, or when, you know, some of these kids get dropped into the fire and the situation doesn't improve, you can ruin them. I always go back to David Carr, you know, who had all the talent in the world, could make every throw. And after 2 or 3 seasons of playing behind that Texas offensive line, his shot. And he was a shadow of the player that he could have been. So that's the biggest fear, I think, for me right now with Cam, because I think it's still too early to tell what he is actually. I would just like to find out what he is behind a real offensive line with a better coaching staff and, like you said, a few weapons around him so that we could actually make a true assessment. Because right now it's almost impossible to do that. We can't even say what he is or what he could be at this point.
Yeah, the jury's certainly still out. Really young, talented kid, but Dynasty Leaguers may be looking for him to produce maybe next season, because this season we certainly haven't seen too much. After this coming break, James and I are going to dive into another quarterback, Drake Maye, who's played extremely well, and we'll talk about his fantasy value. Plus, is the era of Derrick Henry being an elite fantasy player over? Is it time to move on from him in Dynasty? You're listening to the Locked On Dynasty podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything, but from smooth handling to intuitive controls. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty podcast. James, let's talk about Drake Maye. Listen, Drake Maye.
First, Fabs, let's talk about how badly I want to go out and buy a Mazda now.
That's right. You got to love that leather upholstery, man. It's always the best. Let's talk about Drake Maye. Yeah. Drake Maye is a guy I loved coming into the season. I love the skill set. I mean, right now he's in the top 10 in fantasy points among quarterbacks. And when you look at where he's going in terms of average draft position in dynasty startups, he's the QB8. There are guys like Joe Burrow going ahead of him, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray. Give me your take on Drake Maye, like his sort of career arc here, and where you see him going from a dynasty perspective. I mean, is this going to be a guy, not the next Josh Allen, obviously, but someone that you're going to be starting every single week moving forward into the foreseeable future?
Yeah, arrow pointing way, way up, man. We heard about the potential, and he certainly seems to be hitting his ceiling, or a lot closer to his ceiling every week than his floor. And he's still very young, and he's got a very good head coach. I can vouch for that, because we had some good years with Vrabel in Tennessee. And I can't imagine why anyone would be taking any of the guys you mentioned ahead of Drake Maye in dynasty leagues. That's just silliness. You get a chip like him in dynasty, you're set for a decade. He looks like he's going to be one of those guys.
Yeah,
at some point he'll start loosening up. He'll grow the hair. He'll get a mustache, like But yeah, man, I think the skill set's there. He's doing it with guys like Stefon Diggs, who is not the Stefon Diggs that we remember. He's got Hunter Henry, I guess, as a security blanket, and some dudes that you probably couldn't pick out of a lineup, which is even more impressive.
Yeah, and the offensive line, has still got some improvement to do. Drake Maye, if they build around him, we're talking about a quarterback who I think is going to end up being a QB1 in fantasy for a long, long time. I love his skills as a runner, which obviously are very important from a fantasy perspective. He's not going to give you 700 yards rushing like, Lamar or someone like that, but 400 or 500 yards on the ground, maybe, 3-4 touchdowns every year, and improvement as a passer. I mean, last week, that rapport with Stefon Diggs really started to sort of take form. They've got New Orleans this week. So I'm really feeling like Drake Maye has a shot to be, again, not Josh Allen, not Jalen Hurts, not at that level, but maybe just a level below in dynasty.
I wish I had more shares of him, to be honest. I do have him in a couple places, but he's not on my dynasty team, and that's where you really want him.
One player that is on your dynasty team, and I know that you have a special place in your heart for Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry has been one of the great running backs in fantasy football, one of the great running backs in the league, 2,000-yard rusher. He's going to the Hall of Fame. But we're starting to see some kinks in the armor. And whether it's just all of those carries for all of those years in the playoffs, in the regular season, a combination of Lamar being hurt right now, Derrick Henry's numbers have not been great. Outside of that first big game that he had against Buffalo, the numbers have really started to decline. So where are you on Derrick Henry? I mean, like, are you at a point now where you're kind of stuck and there's nowhere to really go with him because you can't trade him in dynasty? Or are you trying to maybe flip him to a team that could use a running back to make a run at a championship? Like, where do you stand with the King right now?
Well, I'll start by saying I'm not sure how objective I can be about this particular player. He is my favorite modern player in today's game, and it's not particularly close. I love that guy. I did something really crazy, which was I recognized a couple seasons ago that he was probably at the tail end of his trade value in Dynasty, and I sent him away, and it hurt me to do it. And then I traded for him to bring him back, just because I felt like
That was remorse.
I think he has another, 2 solid seasons in him, and I want that to happen on my team, and I will hold on to him until the end. So the guy that I sent him right back after 1 season. And I think it's a lot of things conspiring against him. You mentioned most of them. That offense without Lamar looks very, very different. You can't stack the box against Derrick Henry when Lamar can take off and do what he does. Right now, you're not worried about Cooper Rush going anywhere. So he's seeing different defensive fronts. The other problem is that Baltimore defense, man, they can't stop anybody. And the game script is turning into a shootout every week. And as we know, Derrick Henry comes off the field on 3rd downs. He just always has. So all of these things are working against him. Plus the fact that, he's no spring chicken. I'd love to see what happens when Lamar gets back. I still think there's some fantasy value to be had with him. But to your point, I do think we're nearing the end of the dynasty rope. If you could get, a 3rd rounder for him right now.
You think that's all he's worth right now is the 3?
I think you ask for a 2, and depending on how desperate, the other team is. And look, there's one of those teams in my dynasty league every year where it's like, hey, I'm going all in to try to win this year. Give me, give me this guy, give me that guy, and I'll figure out the rest later. We got one player who's really, really like that. I love him because he's the most fun to deal with, and it's like, I'm here to win this year, and I figure out everything else later. So if you got one of those guys in your league, then maybe you get a 2nd for the king, and I think that would be good value in dynasty for sure.
One of the players who Henry is actually still going ahead of is Quinshon Judkins, which I don't get at all. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. You know that I was all in on him going into the season, and I have him in a ton of different leagues. You're looking at a short sample size, obviously. And, the Browns have made a lot of moves. They traded away Joe Flacco, who's now with the Bengals. He's going to be starting this week. But Judkins looks like he's going to be the centerpiece of that offense. Like, in Dynasty, what are you feeling like his ceiling is? I mean, are we talking about, like, top 5 RB1? Are we talking about a top 10 RB1, a high RB2? From what you've seen with Judkins right now, like, what do you sort of, we'll put your Sean Spencer cap on. Yeah. What is his long-term value in Dynasty?
My Sean Spencer cap is a little rusty. It's got some sweat stains on it. Probably needs to be washed.
Yeah.
I'll tell you who he reminds me of, and that's the guy that they built their offense around not too long ago, and that was a dude named Nick Chubb in his prime. Dude runs hard, man, and he's got vision, and he's like a one-cut guy, and he's gone. And I think – yeah, the biggest thing that I know me and probably a lot of other fantasy owners were waiting for was to see if the dude was going to play, right. And then does it matter how good you are when you're playing in that offense? And what he's proven in, like you said, a small sample size, but still, is that he's that good. So if he's that good now, and they continue to build around him, and they get healthy on the line. You're talking about a guy that could easily be a top 10, top 7, RB1, as long as he stays healthy. I mean, I don't think they're going to get any worse on offense, right? So you figure if this is the floor of what he has to deal with and what's going to be around him, then the future's pretty bright. And to your credit, you were all over him, man. I don't know anybody that was touting Judkins the way that you were. So that's why you're the pro.
I just wanted to take the dip. The opportunity was there. I just wanted to take the dip on him. And, sometimes, they say about the blind squirrel finds a nut. So that one there was a pretty good nut, looks like, especially when we're talking about Dynasty, James. So next up, we're going to look at your Dynasty team, and we're going to talk about some of the players you're counting on to take home a league championship and maybe some players that you're a little bit concerned about. We're going to get to that next. You're listening to the Locked On Dynasty podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans, cheering on your team. Let's be honest, getting tickets can be a real hassle, right? I mean, between the queues, the login screens, and the prices jumping at checkout. It's really frustrating. That's why I use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Gametime is fast and easy. It's backed up by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all the fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. The app made it super simple. I could even see the exact view from the seats before I was buying them. Like when the Yankees are in town, and yes, I'm very depressed about the Yankees, but when they come to Florida, I love that feature because I can see my view from the seats. And I love the zone deals too. Like you could pick the section, Gametime picks the seats, and you save big time. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tag, ticket. Go download Gametime immediately. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I mean, you could build parlays, you can try player props, and you can follow the lines during the game. And it makes watching football even more exciting when you've got something writing on the action, especially like when you're a Cowboys fan like me and you never know, when the Cowboys are inevitably going to have some sort of on-field implosion in terms of real football. I like to have a little action on the side there. And of course, FanDuel helps me do that. So whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats like I do, FanDuel makes the game day experience just so much better. So what are you waiting for, folks? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All right, we are back here. It's Fabs. It's Roday. It's the Locked On Dynasty podcast. And now we're going to get into some of the players on your team.
Sure.
And we'll start off because you've got Caleb Williams. Now, you had mentioned it's a super flex league. You've got Jalen Hurts and Caleb, so that's a nice little duo there. Knowing that Caleb Williams has been somewhat up and down over his first year in 5 games in the NFL, or 4 games, what is your projection for him? Like, are you looking at him to be a top 10 quarterback moving forward?
That's certainly the hope. I do believe in the talent, and I was really excited about the coaching change. So I want to give him a full season with this guy, and he's got all the weapons you could possibly hope to have as a young quarterback around him. So yeah, I'm hoping to see some major steps forward this season, and I'm pretty encouraged by what I've seen so far. I think I had the 3rd pick after making a series of moves. And Fantasy Effects expert Liz Loza, who we both know, had sort of proclaimed early on that she would be taking Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams, and we were like, yeah, sure you will. And then she put her money where her mouth was and took Jaden at 2, which left Caleb sitting there for me at 3 because I think JJ took Marvin Harrison at 1. So I was very pleasantly surprised. You don't think you're going to get Caleb Williams with the 3rd pick of a dynasty rookie draft when he's the number 1 overall choice in the real draft. So I thought it was a bit of a coup. And yeah, I mean, there's been lumps. I think he's a young guy. I think he probably came in thinking that he could rely a little bit too much on his natural ability. And I think he's learning very quickly that the NFL is a different animal, and he's making those adjustments. And to answer your question, do I think he can be a top 10 guy? Yes, I do. I think we'll have a much better idea of that by the end of this season. But, the tools are all there. The weapons are there. The scheme seems to be making sense for him. And he's a guy that I'm excited to watch on a week-to-week basis. So I'm certainly hopeful.
You also have Jamar Chase. I have Jamar Chase in one of my dynasty leagues too. And listen, he's a great player. I do got to admit that I'm concerned about the durability issues that Joe Burrow has, because when Joe Burrow's not in the game, Jamar Chase is hit or miss. And we've seen that. Have you ever sat down and thought, maybe I need to move on from Jamar Chase because Joe Burrow's lack of durability hurts Chase's consistency? Is it not the right time to move him, or are you just standing pat and waiting for Burrow to come back? Maybe at the end of this season, but more likely maybe next season.
I mean, I think you have to be willing to move on from anyone at any time. If you're a savvy dynasty player, and like you said, you're not just thinking about the present, but you're thinking about the future. So you should always pick up the phone, and you should always be looking at, like, how do I maximize the value for any one player? To your point, I think now is probably the wrong time to try and move Chase, because, you're going to get 75 cents on the dollar, which, why do that? If you want to move Jamar because you think you can get a king's ransom for him, do it when he's got his quarterback and he's putting up Jamar numbers, and take somebody to the cleaners. I think that's the way you move Jamar Chase. So for now, all of us Jamar owners just got to cross our fingers, hope that he can give us wide receiver 2 numbers with whoever's slinging it. I don't think Joe Flacco is necessarily, the worst, option for that offense. He's going to throw the ball. Sometimes it's going to, go to the other team's defensive backs, but it's not like Jamar's not going to get a bunch of targets. I think he will. So, if he can just give us 70% Jamar this season until Joe Burrow gets back, like, you'll take that. And in my team especially, I've got Rome Odunze overperforming, which kind of helps balance the fact that Jamar isn't Jamar. I made a big deal for Amon-Ra before the season started, so I look at my receivers and I'm like, I could be in a lot worse of a spot for a season where Jamar isn't doing Jamar things. So I'll be sitting tight and hoping he can just kind of ride this out.
And I love to trade. You know that. I mean, you and I have already made a trade in a redraft, and I'm always looking to make moves. In Dynasty, how important is it to be active as a general manager and make trades? I mean, you've said that you've made several trades. It looks like some of them have been pretty successful. I mean, and there are some people out there, which I don't understand, who just don't want to make trades at all, or they are trying to rob you every minute of the day, which, most of the time is not going to happen. How active do you feel like dynasty managers need to be in terms of the trade market? And at what point as a manager do you say, okay, I'm going to be buying now to try and win a championship, or maybe I'm going to step back and start building up some draft capital?
Yeah, I think, and this is just my obviously my personal take, and I should also add that I'm off to the worst start I've ever had in my history as a fantasy football player this season. So don't listen to anything I say. Luckily, my dynasty league is the one league where I'm doing pretty well, so I don't feel like a complete fraud coming on your podcast. But I don't think you're going to win dynasty titles by not trading, holding on to your 5 picks every year, doing the best you can in the draft, and that doesn't add up to championships to me. I think, you can be a kind of middle of the road team. In our league, it's the most active players are generally the ones that are there at the end. So yeah, I mean, I don't really see, if you think about it in terms of like, well, why do we like dynasty? Well, because it kind of mirrors real world football. And you think about the teams in the NFL that never make moves. It's kind of the same story, these aggressive GMs that go out there and take the bold swings and make the big moves are usually the ones that, are playing for titles. I mean, that's right. Kind of the name of the game. And so, I think it's sort of what you have to do in dynasty leagues as well. You're not always going to hit. You have to be willing to miss and miss big. And if you do, that you're going to have to sort of figure out the road back, and that could set you back a season or 2 seasons. But that's the fun of it. You got to risk it for the biscuit. You got to get those nuts. All about getting nuts, Fabs. The name of this podcast could be Fabs Gets All the Nuts if you wanted it to be. So yeah, I think there comes a point, and we're getting pretty close to it, October-ish, where you have to look at your team and go, okay, is this 2-3 team better than its record? And with a couple tweaks, I can be right in this thing. Is this 2-3 team lucky that it even has 2 wins? And if so, should I start thinking about, players I can move, older guys that that some of these better teams might be interested in. And I can start, putting together some moves so that I can control next season's rookie draft. But I think now is the time where you have to start being really honest about what you have and what you don't have, and then flip that switch one way or the other. It's crazy. Like I have some 1-4 teams this season that are like good teams, where you're like, damn, like this team is better than 1-4. And you look at like, oh, well, I've had some bad luck in terms of, every week I'm playing someone who just goes off. But the law of averages will usually come back to the middle in those situations. But then, you and I both know we've also had teams that are like 4-1, and you're just like, I don't think this is a contender. I don't think this team is going to do a lot of damage in the playoffs. So I think you just have to be honest with yourself and make decisions accordingly. And this particular dynasty team, I think this season for me is a contender. So I will probably be making smallish moves to try and win this title and take it out of JJ's hands. But I will do so knowing that future me is going to have to fill some holes, because Derrick, unfortunately, is going to finish with me and probably not finish well. Cooper Kupp is not going anywhere. I'm going to have to fill that hole. And a guy like J.K. Dobbins, who I'm a big fan of because of his story and how much he's overcome, does have a rookie nipping at his heels. So, that's not necessarily a guy that you feel super confident about counting on moving forward either.
Yeah. Listen, man, I mean, you sound like a fantasy analyst. Okay. So it's always great to have you on here talking about fantasy and talking about your love of dynasty football. And I really appreciate you taking some time here. And of course, to everyone out there listening, we thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen of the day. For your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler the Madman Roland gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On Dynasty on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And join me tomorrow when my pal Bob Harris from Football Guys will be joining the show. James, thanks again for joining the Locked On Dynasty podcast, and we will see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks for having me. Don't forget to have fun.